This gaming computer only cost me $100 and it runs games like Fortnite, Counter-Strike, The Witcher 3, and more. Let me show you guys how I built this. I'm Yams from PC Flipping Central. If any of you guys are new here, we're a YouTube channel and community dedicated to flipping computers, meaning we take old or used hardware and build it into a full computer to sell for a profit. Originally, I wanted this to be sort of a flip-up challenge where I'd start with $100 and try to flip computers until I had $1,000, but I think I'm going to abandon that idea just due to a lack of time and some other projects happening. So look, I know I have a terrible reputation for these ultra-cheap gaming computers. My most recent one was a $170 fully custom desktop build that had a first-gen i7 and a GTX 760. I also did a $120 fully custom computer that had an i5 2400 and a GTX 560. Yeah, looking back, those were some of the worst value computers I have ever built in my life. Hopefully this video is my redemption to come back to super budget machines though. I decided to kind of take a different approach this time around instead of doing a fully custom gaming computer, and I wanted to simply upgrade an older office computer. So I started looking around on eBay and locally for old office computers. Dell Optiplex machines are usually good options, so I had a special interest in them. Not much was showing up locally, so I ended up settling for this Dell Optiplex 790 on eBay. With shipping and tax included, it ended up being $44.86. I actually got $2 off of this thing because it was selling for $17.19, and they accepted my offer of $15. It ain't much, but whatever I can save, I will. The killer here was shipping costs. I would have much rather preferred to get a local deal for cheaper, but this is what we're working with. This Optiplex came with no storage, 4GB of DDR3 RAM, and an Intel Core i3-2100. Let's be honest, the i3-2100 is not a gaming CPU, and 4GB of RAM is barely enough to even run Windows nowadays, so we're going to need to put some upgrades in here. Around the same time as I bought this Optiplex, a deal showed up on Hardware Swap where this seller had a lot of graphics cards for sale. I ended up buying a few from him, but in that lot was this PowerColor RX 560 4GB model. He sold me this for only $25 shipped, which is honestly an amazing price. The RX 560 is almost the perfect pair for this computer because it doesn't require any external power connectors, meaning we don't need to upgrade the power supply in our Optiplex. To make things even better, this is a 4GB model of the RX 560, meaning it can run modern games even better than its 2GB counterpart. Now it was time to upgrade the Optiplex itself. I didn't do any expensive searching here, so I bought all of these upgrades from eBay. First up, I found this Intel Core i5-2500 for $8.13 after tax. Nothing crazy, but upgrading this computer to a quad-core CPU will be immensely helpful in gaming. These second-gen i5s used to be my go-to CPUs for PC flipping maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but nowadays they are honestly showing their age. I wouldn't pick up one of these unless you're on a super tight budget like I am. Next up, I needed some more RAM. Luckily, this computer came with one single 4GB stick of RAM already, so I could have just gotten another 4GB stick and called it a day. However, I found this deal on an 8GB kit of ADATA DDR3 RAM so we can have 12GB of memory in this build. In my opinion, 8GB of RAM just isn't enough for gaming anymore, and 12GB should be the bare minimum. This kit ran me only $4.15 after tax. I literally have no idea how this seller even made any money off of this sale. Finally, I needed some storage. I contemplated just getting a mechanical hard drive for this build, but since there was enough room in the budget to get a cheap SSD, I went for it. I found this random Samsung 256GB SSD for $15.16 after tax, which is not a good deal, honestly. You should be getting used 250GB SSDs for $8 to $10 in my opinion, but the SSD market isn't great right now. Using an SSD instead of a mechanical hard drive though will be so much faster and make the computer feel way more snappy. 256GB is also enough for a couple games to fit on there. This computer will most likely be going to some kid who's just playing Fortnite and maybe a couple other light games, so 250GB will be enough. I do have a 1TB hard drive on hand, but we're out of budget, so maybe I'll offer it as an add-on or something. The last thing I needed to add into the budget was a Windows key since I'm going to be flipping this for profit later. Windows keys only cost me a maximum of $4, and that's pretty much all the budget we have left. Even though this hardware isn't officially supported by Windows 11, I can bypass the TPM and Secure Boot check upon installation so that Windows 11 can get installed. With all the parts together, this build cost me a total of $101.26. So we did end up going a little bit over budget, but you can obviously do this for under $100 if you do some better deal searching and maybe even forfeit buying a Windows key. Now look, This computer for sure can be built for cheaper or with some better performing parts with some more deal searching. If you want the best value and are following the same general structure of this computer build, definitely try to find better deals on the Optiplex or a similar pre-built computer so that you don't have to upgrade it as much as I had to. But now with this gaming computer all built, I decided to download and test some games and benchmarks to see if you really can get a nice gaming computer for $100. I'm going to do some synthetic benchmarks first, and then we'll transition into some actual gaming benchmarks. I'd also like to apologize for the benchmark recordings. My capture card for some reason didn't work on this computer. I'm not sure if it's because it was an Optiplex or what, but I just had to use my phone camera to record the screen. First up is Cinebench R23 to test how good this i5 2500 really is. For the multi-core score, we got 2,233, and then for the single core score, we got a score of 672. By today's standards, these figures definitely aren't great, and the fact that the CPU is only single-threaded is definitely a big hit to it. Here's some comparison charts to similarly priced CPUs. This i5 didn't even really hit temperatures above 70 degrees Celsius during this run, which is good and honestly better than I was expecting from the stock Dell Optiplex cooler. It also stayed extremely quiet. I heard my ceiling fan more than I did this computer. Second benchmark is Unigine Heaven DX11. I always run this at 1080p with the default settings, which yielded us a score of 1,193. Here's how that compares to some similar builds. So far, not so good. This is the worst performing computer I've built, at least in these benchmarks. I'm actually not sure how this computer loses in Unigine Heaven to an i5 2500K and R9 270X build. Could anyone tell me in the comments? Anyways, this doesn't mean that it can't play games later on. Another thing to point out is the RX 560 is staying extremely cool, which is to be expected from such a low power graphics card, but it's nice to see since this Optiplex case is a very constrictive chassis in terms of airflow. And of course, I had to run 3D Mark TimesBy. It's a classic. This was obviously a stuttery mess, but I believe this benchmark actually runs at 1440p. I just ran the default settings run and ended up getting a total score of 1,792, which apparently is lower than the average score for this hardware, but I am running my stuff at stock settings, it's not overclocked. I also decided to run the new 3D Mark benchmark, which is called Steel Nomad Lite. And it's advertised to be a benchmark for lightweight PCs, so I thought it would be perfect for this computer. Well, it didn't run that good, honestly. It was giving 12.3 FPS out on average. The score I got for this was 1,661, which looks to be the only score for my hardware since this same score is not only the average, but also the best score. Now let's get to the best part, which is actual video games. I only tested a few games, but I thought these would be a good representation of what the computer is meant to play. Buyers looking for an ultra-budget gaming computer nowadays are usually only looking to play one game mainly, and that of course is Fortnite. So we had to test it. It's running at 1080p performance mode with all settings at low and view distance at epic. During this playthrough in a battle royale game, I got an FPS average of 96.7 with a 1% low of 3.1 FPS and a 0.1% low of 1.6 FPS. I was really disappointed with how this game ran, and I think it's due to the 2nd gen i5. Fortnite is a game that doesn't run very well on 4-core 4 threads, and I could tell because it was stuttering a lot. One of my friends even complained about having lots of stutters on Fortnite when he owned an i3 9100F. I decided to try this game with a 60 FPS cap to see if that helped. Capping the FPS at 60, I was able to increase the 1% lows to 8.8 FPS, but the 1% lows virtually didn't improve at all, being 1.8 FPS. I did think that this experience at a capped 60 FPS was more playable though, so I'd recommend running it at that. I did notice that the CPU stayed at 80 to 100% utilization in this game, and was actually close to using 10 gigabytes of RAM. So opting for 12 gigabytes in this build seemed to be a good choice. Styled on that guy, absolutely, holy crap. Next up is Counter-Strike 2. I've been enjoying this game a lot recently, so I decided to use it as a test on this machine. At 1080p with the lowest preset for graphics, I got an average FPS of 52.2, a 1% low of 33 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 23.1. I thought it played fairly smoothly, and as you can see by the footage on screen, this 50 FPS experience was no hindrance to me hitting some nasty one-taps with the Deagle. Diving into something a bit more beefy, I tested Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This game came out in 2018 and this computer should meet the minimum requirements for it, so I went for it. I set the graphics to the low preset and ran the in-game benchmark at 1080p. I didn't use the MSI Afterburner benchmark for this, but the benchmark resulted in an average of 41 FPS, and while I was watching it, I noticed very minimal stutters. For fun, I also enabled AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution, however that actually dropped our average FPS in the benchmark down to 40. There is also an option for Intel XeSS in this game, but right as I turned it on to the performance mode, I instantly noticed an FPS drop, so I'm not even going to mess with XeSS on that machine for this game. Finally, I played a little bit of The Witcher 3. I actually haven't played through this game on my own yet, so I just benchmarked a little scene at the beginning of the game. Using the 1080p low preset, I was able to get an average FPS of 48.8, with a 1% low of 28.4 FPS and a 0.1% low of 7 FPS. I didn't really notice much stuttering in this game, however the graphics did not look that great. In terms of frame rate at least, this game was definitely playable though. All in all, for only $100, I'm pretty proud of this computer. If you really wanted to get a little taste of PC gaming without spending very much money at all, this isn't a horrible option. I know that this RX 560, especially since it's the 4GB version, can run games better than this. I believe it's being held back by the i5 2500, and when I resell these parts, I think I'll pair this RX 560 with a better CPU, and probably just throw something like a 750 Ti in this i5 2500 machine. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this computer build. I love doing these super budget gaming PCs and seeing how they perform, plus I think I got a pretty awesome deal on that graphics card. I'm going to flip this build, or at least most of it, in the future for a profit, so if you wanted some updates on how that goes, go ahead and join our Discord server with the link down below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe. Flipping Central is closing in on that 1,000 subscriber mark, and the team can't wait to see those quadruple digits. Big thanks to everyone who's already subscribed and who is supporting the channel. Once again, I'm Yams, and I'll see you guys in the next video.